The Forgotten Genocide, Uncovering the Atrocities in Tigray, Ethiopia. A humanitarian tragedy ignored. In an era where international institutions constantly preach the values of human rights, justice, and peace, the people of Tigray, an ethnic group in northern Ethiopia, have been systematically slaughtered, starved, raped, and displaced. The genocide in Tigray, which began in November 2020, has left a dark and bloody stain on our collective conscience. What began as a political conflict between the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, and the Ethiopian federal government quickly escalated into a full-blown campaign of ethnic cleansing and mass atrocities, with international inaction and silence enabling the perpetrators. While ceasefires have been signed and some diplomatic gestures made, the people of Tigray continue to suffer from ongoing human rights violations, a shattered economy, and the trauma of one of the worst modern genocides largely ignored by the global community. The origins of the conflict: power, politics, and ethnic tensions. To understand the genocide, we must first understand Ethiopia's complex ethnic federalism. The TPLF dominated Ethiopian politics for nearly 3 decades until 2018, when Abiy Ahmed rose to power. Though his initial message was one of reform and unity, relations between Abiy's administration and the TPLF quickly deteriorated. Tensions culminated in November 2020 when Abiy ordered a military offensive in Tigray, accusing the TPLF of attacking a federal military base. But what was framed as a brief law and order operation rapidly morphed into an all-out war on the Tigrayan population. Perpetrators and methods. A calculated campaign of destruction. 3 principal actors have been implicated in the Tigray genocide: Ethiopian National Defense Forces, ENDF, Eritrean Defense Forces, EDF, Amhara regional militias. Their methods have been coldly systematic and horrifying. 1. Mass killings and extrajudicial executions. Tigrayan civilians were massacred in towns and villages, often with entire families wiped out. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International documented mass killings in places like Aksum, Maikadra, and Dengelat. In Aksum alone, hundreds of unarmed civilians were reportedly slaughtered over a 2-day period in November 2020 by Eritrean troops. Witnesses spoke of indiscriminate shooting, bodies left to rot in the streets, and mass graves dug by survivors under threat of violence. 2. Rape as a weapon of war. Perhaps the most harrowing accounts have come from survivors of systematic rape and sexual violence. Tigrayan women and girls, some as young as 8, were gang-raped by soldiers who often mutilated their genitals or inserted foreign objects as a form of torture. Many were told, "This is to cleanse your Tigrayan blood." The UN, in its investigations, classified this use of rape as a deliberate weapon of war, aimed not only at traumatizing individuals but at destroying the ethnic fabric of the Tigrayan community. 3. Induced famine and blockades. The Ethiopian and Eritrean governments deliberately created famine conditions by destroying crops, burning food stores, killing livestock, and blocking humanitarian aid. Trucks filled with life-saving supplies were denied access to Tigray for months, leaving millions at risk of starvation. According to UN estimates, over 90% of Tigray's 6 million people required urgent food aid during the height of the blockade. The U.S. government and other international bodies declared that famine was being used as a method of war, making it a clear violation of international humanitarian law. 4. Destruction of infrastructure and cultural erasure. Hospitals, schools, places of worship, and historical sites were targeted and destroyed. Over 70% of health facilities in Tigray were rendered non-functional. Places like the Al-Najashi Mosque, one of the oldest Islamic sites in Africa, were bombed. The intent? To erase not only the people of Tigray but their history, culture, and capacity to recover. The death toll and displacement. The death toll is staggering. While exact numbers are difficult due to media blackouts and limited access, independent analysts estimate that between 300,000 and 600,000 civilians may have died due to violence, starvation, and lack of medical access. Over 2 million people have been internally displaced, and many more have fled to neighboring Sudan. Some survivors describe walking for weeks, hiding in mountains or forests, surviving on leaves and dirty water while avoiding soldiers who hunted them like animals. Ceasefire, a mirage of peace. In November 2022, a ceasefire agreement was signed in Pretoria between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF. While hailed as a breakthrough, the ground realities tell a different story. Eritrean and Amhara forces reportedly remained in western and northern Tigray, continuing atrocities with impunity. Humanitarian access remains restricted. Journalists are banned or harassed. Accountability is elusive. The so-called peace has not ended the suffering. International silence and complicity. The response from the international community has been grossly inadequate. The African Union, based in Addis Ababa, has been accused of neutrality bordering on complicity. Western powers like the US and EU have issued statements of concern but failed to impose meaningful sanctions. The UN Security Council, despite repeated evidence of war crimes and crimes against humanity, has failed to take concrete action, hamstrung by geopolitics and Ethiopia's strategic alliances. Meanwhile, billions in aid continue to flow into Ethiopia, even as its government obstructs humanitarian efforts. The need for justice, recognition and accountability. The genocide in Tigray is one of the great moral failures of our time. It's a story of brutal state violence, international indifference, and human resilience. What is needed now? International recognition of the genocide. Criminal investigations by the International Criminal Court (ICC) into war crimes and crimes against humanity. Independent humanitarian access and monitoring mechanisms in all parts of Tigray. Sanctions on individuals and entities responsible for the atrocities. Long-term support for survivors, including trauma counseling, reconstruction, and reintegration. Conclusion: never again? Or again and again? The words never again have been repeated endlessly since the Holocaust, Rwanda, and Srebrenica. Yet here we are, again, watching a population be butchered, starved, and brutalized because of who they are. The genocide in Tigray should outrage every decent human being. It is not a regional conflict. It is not a political debate. It is a crime against humanity. The world must act, not tomorrow, not in retrospect, not with empty statements, but now. Because if Tigray is forgotten, then no atrocity is too far and no people are truly safe.